Yes, question. Please kindly explain the meaning of the phrase standing up for your happiness or standing up for yourself. How do we do this without hurting others? Did Buddha hurt his family when he left the palace to seek enlightenment? I personally, I don't tend to use this kind of phrases like standing up for your happiness or standing up for yourself, but my perspective on this would come from the Buddha's teaching that we need to develop, practice in a way that leads to happiness and benefit for ourselves and happiness and benefit for others. So there needs to be that kind of balance. Now, to generalize, it's often the case that very immature people who sort of no interest in quality of life or what's right and what's wrong or whatever, tend to think that it's their right and they're just to take. So they want to take and get as much as they can, and they think they're smart if they can do that successfully. When somebody wakes up a little bit and in conventional terms moves in the path of goodness, then they tend to find their joy in giving. But the effort to give can sometimes also be imbalanced, and it leads to the fact that many conventionally good people consider that doing anything for themselves is selfish, and that you should be always doing something for others all the time. And that's what a good person does, never thinks of themselves, only thinks of other people. The Buddha said that that's a mistaken view, and one that comes from not really understanding the way things are, because there's important and fundamental relationship between your own welfare and that of others. We give an example of people who do have very wholesome and praiseworthy ideals, people who work for charities and for doing social work and social projects, often with very small wages and long hours, and very difficult conditions. Then unless they have some boundaries, and unless they put some work into their own happiness, then they become completely drained, usually, and burn out after not very long. They're not able to sustain that kind of selflessness for very long. It's a wonderful ideal, but practically I've seen very few people who can do that for very long. The other thing, the other element of that is that if you had any contact with charitable groups and people who have very good intentions, and they don't want any kind of financial reward from what they do, but there tend to be huge arguments, a lot of ego, views, opinions, conceit, I know what's right, you don't, and so on and so forth, and minor and petty and even major power struggles. So when someone's not doing their inner work and they don't really understand their own motivations and their own defilements, then very good activities, goodness and kindness, can easily become distorted and can lead to the exact opposite and lead to a great deal of suffering and disappointment all around. So the Buddha is saying that you have to give effort to both sides, the outside and the inside, other people and yourself, in a balanced way. And if you are, within you're experiencing some inner peace and happiness, then people around you pick up on that. If you are someone who's able to be calm when everyone else is panicking, even though you don't say anything, you're already providing a wonderful assistance to everyone else. You know, if you've ever been in that situation where everybody's running around like chickens with their head cut off and everyone's panicking, you just need one person who's kind of calm and centered and grounded, and that can have a wonderful effect. I remember reading about Thich Nhat Hanh, the famous Vietnamese teacher, talking about the experience of the Vietnamese refugees on the boat people, as they were called, in I guess would be the 80s, when they were escaping from Vietnam by sea through South China Sea, and storms and pirates and very frightening experiences. And many people said that you have like a very overcrowded boat with tens or even 100 people on it, and you see pirates or some terrible thing about to happen. It only needed in 100 just one or two people who were calm, just to have that calming effect on everybody else. So if you're putting that work into being able to be mindful and centered and calm, even when things are very frightening and threatening, then it's both the inner work and it's having an effect on the people around you. When you're happy and balanced and kind, then that has a good effect on others. But those kinds of wholesome inner qualities, you don't have them as a right. You know, it's not like they're your possession. Once you have them, they stay with you. You have to keep training them and keep looking after them. Otherwise, if you're living in a very stressful environment, all that sense of groundedness you had and inner peace just disappears if you don't look after it. So that would be my kind of take on this idea of standing up for yourself and standing up for your happiness, meaning that if you think being good and being a good person means that you give up everything of yourself for others, then I think that you won't find that that's a very sustainable kind of attitude. Did the Buddha hurt his family when he left the palace to seek enlightenment? Well, yes, initially. I think that his parents, he said his parents cried. You know that story that we all know about the Buddha leaving in the middle of the night and getting on the horse and everyone's asleep, and there's actually no reference for that in the suttas themselves. That's comes from poems and stories written after. The only reference that the Buddha himself made was he said when he left the palace, his parents were crying. They had tears in their eyes. The Buddha's story, you know, is one we have to see within the context of his many past lives, and his life as a bodhisattva accumulating parami, and so this was the very last step of a career as a bodhisattva that had spanned millions and millions and millions of years. And so it was necessary to disappoint his family temporarily for a much greater good, which would be felt by all beings and for many generations afterwards. And let's not forget that as soon as the Buddha was enlightened, first place he went back home, and he was able to teach his father, the king, became an arahant. His wife became a nun, and she became an arahant. And his son Rahula became a novice, And then when he was, I think around 20, when he'd newly ordained as a monk, then he became an arahant. So you can say the Buddha, in fact, gave the greatest gift to all his living family members, and many of his cousins and other family members and friends who became monks and then became enlightened beings afterwards. So in terms of, hurting ones we love, then it's not always so straightforward, is it? Even for us, and we're not comparing ourselves with the Buddha. But one question I've often asked is, let's say your parents are gamblers. They like going to the casino and gambling huge sums of money and getting drunk. And then they say, we want you to go with us. Here's some money, you can gamble, and after we've been gambling, we can go drinking together and do it as a family. Now, if you were to say to your parents, if they encouraged you to that, and you say, no, I don't want to do that, would that mean that you were nirakun, akatanju? Would you be a bad child? Only in Buddha's teaching, no, you wouldn't, because the encouraging your parents or supporting parents who are doing very harmful and dangerous and unwholesome things is actually the bad karma, and that finding some way to lead parents away from such bad, unwholesome activities, it would in fact be a way of repaying debt of gratitude to parents. So there are many cases where you have to ask yourself, if I'm disappointing my parents, what's my intention here? Is it just out of my own selfish desires, or is there something more solid and more wise here? And then we refer to the Buddha's teachings. And so if something the Buddha says is bad karma, and then we refrain from that, and we say we're not going to do that, then that's a wise action. Or if we want to do something that's very good, and all the wise people, the Arya Pugala, พระอริยเจ้าทั้งหลายพระพุทธเจ้าทรงเสริม then even if in the short term parents or people that we care for are unhappy about it, we can hope that in the long run they will change their mind. And of course, in the case of many Western monks, when they became monks, then parents were very unhappy. I know monks and parents wouldn't speak to their son when he became a monk for 5 years, wouldn't even answer the phone, wouldn't reply to letters or anything, just so angry and unhappy. But in almost every case, over a period of years, and not usually that long at all, they come round, and then when they see the changes in their son, and they see the kind of person that their son is turning into through a monastic training, they tend to become very happy and proud. But initially, at the beginning, they're very unhappy. So it's a matter of having a standard, like an objective standard. We take standard of the Buddha's teaching, so that if we have some kind of conflict of views with someone who's important to us, whether it's parents or friends or girlfriend, boyfriend, then having some way of testing it against the teachings of wise people, so that we're not just เข้าข้างตัวเอง or it's like taking your own side. The question, well, I am still enjoying the meditation, even I always start to feel much pain in my legs. I feel like fighting the pain. I want to overcome it. Sometimes I think 30 minutes is too long, sometimes too short, because I need more time to overcome the pain in my legs. Is this the right way? I still wonder what it will feel like to have real samadhi. Yeah, I did speak about this a little bit last night, and one of the things I've been trying to emphasize during this retreat is it's not just like black and white, if you realize samadhi then you've got something out of meditation. If you don't realize samadhi, you've been wasting your time. What I'm trying to point out is that the very effort to develop meditation skills involves learning all kinds of life skills which can be put to use elsewhere, and enables us to understand the way our minds work and to be able to deal with that. I'm saying, what are the, just now I mentioned, what happens when you find your mind won't stay on the meditation? How quickly do you get discouraged? Just again, another digression. I don't know if anyone's familiar. I recommend works of a writer called Malcolm Gladwell. Does anybody read Malcolm Gladwell? Yeah, there's various of his books. The Tipping Point. One of his latest books called Outliers, which is a kind of study of winners, if you like, or very, very gifted people and what makes them different from others. Well, in one chapter, he looks into why are Asian kids generally better at maths than Western kids. And it's very interesting. But just one point to make. They had a Japanese boys and American boys, and they were given maths questions which they knew were too difficult for their age group, that they wouldn't be able to answer. And they wanted to see how long it took before the kids gave up. And the Japanese children were like 40% longer in every case. It took them much longer before they were willing to give up. Then they were given a second test, and in this there were two questions. Again, both of them probably more difficult, but one question was similar to the first one, which they were unable to answer. And the second one was a different kind of question. Now what happened was, in almost every case, the American kids said, well, that one is the same as the one I couldn't answer, so I'll leave that, and I'll try the other one, which is a different kind of question. I might have better luck. The Japanese kids, on the other hand, they thought, this first question is like that one that I didn't understand, but it's a little bit different. So maybe if I can work out this one, then I'll be able to understand the first one as well. So this is the kind of mind state that leads to success. It's that ability to persevere, never giving up, just keep going, rather than, I can't do this, go on to something else. That's sort of dilettanti. So the conclusion from many of the studies in this book is that what distinguishes Asian children from American children in maths and science is not some kind of Asian genetic inheritance, but it's simply an ability to persevere and to stay with something and not give up. And so this is one of the key qualities that we develop in meditation. Meditation is really tough, it's difficult, but being willing to stick with it, even though you're not getting any immediate gratification from it, is a maturing practice for the mind. It's strengthening that quality of mind, which is stay with something which is valuable, even though you're not getting results that you want straight away, or you can't force it to be the way you want it. You can't get the answers off anybody else. You can't copy the answers off the internet. You have to do the work yourself. There's no corruption possible. It's really you're face to face with the way things are. There's no cheating involved. You can't cheat. You have to do the work. There's no shortcuts. So giving yourself tasks in which there's not even the temptation of cheating, because there's no way you can cheat. You have to do it. You have to stick with it. That's a very maturing practice, and something that has really. So even if the mind's not very peaceful yet, even just a little glimpse of peace, there are so many useful qualities that you develop by trying, the very effort of trying to do this. Now with pain, physical pain is a part of life. We've all experienced it in the past, we're all going to experience it in the future. Some of us are going to experience severe pain sometime in our life, much, much worse than we've ever experienced in the past. So it seemed to me to make sense to investigate the nature of pain, given as it is something that unlikely we can completely avoid in our life, and to develop a more wise relationship to it. Secondly, if you look at your life and the decisions that you've made in your life, you may observe how often we don't do things that would really be good to do, simply because we're afraid that it might be uncomfortable, or it might be painful, or it might be difficult. So our life becomes very narrow, when we have this very sort of restricted comfort zone. I'll do anything, I'll go to anything as long as it's not difficult, or as long as it's not painful, as long as it's not sufferings involved. So in the meditation, then we're taking a new kind of approach. You're saying, I'm willing to be with the physical pain of sitting for a reasonable amount of time, so that I can learn about how my mind reacts to it, how my mind deals with pain, and what increases pain and what decreases pain, how much of pain is physical, how much is subjective. These are the kinds of contemplation we call contemplative science, the science of understanding the nature of our human existence as a direct experience, not as a philosophy. But in the practice of meditation, we also have to recognize our limitations and be realistic. If you're looking at pain, you're experiencing pain every time you meditate, it's depressing, and that's true, it's fact. If you're very skilled meditator, that's not true, but for most everyone else, if you know that every time you sit you're going to have to deal with physical pain, after a while you're not going to enjoy it very much. And it's really important that you should enjoy and value meditation. For that reason, when you experience physical pain, it's not a good idea just to change your position immediately, just to be patient with it just for a while. But if the pain builds up, then you have a choice. One choice is to take the physical pain as a meditation object, as I explained last night. The second alternative is merely to change your posture. And that's perfectly all right. It's not wrong to do that. And if you're feeling you're really into the meditation and you find your mind's becoming more calm and more peaceful and you want to follow this more deeply, then it might be a wise decision just to change your posture so that you can be comfortable and can continue with the investigation of the breath, for instance, or whatever your object might be. So learning about pain, understanding it, understanding your usual reactions to it, how to deal with those more skillfully, that's one part of what we're learning in Buddhist practice, but that we shouldn't do it too often or so much that it feels a real burden or oppressive or heavy or depressing. One thing is we don't have to fight. I mean, one of the most ridiculous cliches in English is, you know, when people die of cancer and it always says, he lost the fight against cancer. The battle against cancer, as if, you know, it's like nature is your enemy, and you have to fight it and sort of squeeze out every last second of life, and then it's sort of a sad loss. But you know, cancer is, you know, if you don't die of cancer, you're going to die of something else. And the reason why so many people die of cancer these days is because we live much longer lives, and formerly we died before we got cancer. But you know, we don't make a monster out of cancer. It's nature, and we're going to die. We're going to get old. We're going to get sick. We're going to die, and it's painful. It's painful if we have it, and it's terrible, perhaps worse even, to see someone we love with cancer. But in the end, it's not nature is not something that you can fight. It's not something that you can overcome. Even if if you're to go into remission through after having cancer, it's not like that you've defeated the natural world, or you've done something. It's just the way causes and conditions work, and maybe give yourself a few more years. But the idea in Western medicine is often, that life under any circumstances, is a success. As Buddhists, we're really interested in the quality of life, particularly at the very end of our life. The state of mind is very important conditioning factor for the next life.